1,301. Don't really know how many. I just do these until I don't. Today, I want to talk about emotional awareness, the cultural corrective when it comes to emotional awareness has been one of the most, I would say, significant shifts in the popular understanding of mental and psychological health. And really, it didn't just start after the pandemic in 2020. It's been going on for 20 years. But what we've seen now in this shift, it's been probably just become very popular in this generation. I mean, for a culture that was historically over-controlled, avoidant of emotional depth, and punishing of emotional expression, and that, if that emotional expression did not conform to the narrow norms of everything, the correct emphasis on emotional awareness, on how to name feelings, processing rather than suppressing, giving permission to the full range of human emotional experience. I mean, all of this transformation has been valuable, and I'm a little scattered in how I want to really approach this today. But let's just put it this way: people needed the permission to think about how they feel. And the language in this transition, the language in this exposure, the language in this popularity mattered. Primarily around shame. I mean, the reduction of shame around having an inner life, an interior life, an inner space, an inner sphere. I mean, it was real, and I believe it was utterly important, especially in the context of spiritual life, social life, etc. And so this corrective was needed. But I believe this corrective has overshot. And I believe it's overshot into something not necessarily straightforwardly harmful, but into something more subtle. And because of that, it's harder to examine. The overshoot is the equation of emotional intensity with identity depth. And let me say that this way: emotional intensity with identity depth, and emotional awareness with freedom. So the idea that the person who feels the most clearly, who possesses the most consistently, or who possesses the most consistent ability to process, and who has developed the deepest relationship with their emotional experience, is then the person who knows themselves most genuinely. And in that, then, is the person who is genuinely free to the highest level. But see, that is not what depth is. And that is not what freedom is. Freedom is not the capacity to feel everything fully. Okay, I choose to witness and to experience emotions at will, based on the context of where I am and what I'm able to have the capacity for. So freedom is the capacity to be stable in the presence of feeling everything fully. Those two things are related, but they're not the same. And the difference between them is one of the most important and, I think, consistently conflated distinctions in the current emotional health landscape, and especially in the, quote, coaching landscape. Because a person can have exquisite, real-time, highly articulate awareness of every emotional current moving through them, and not have any stability to walk on, not have any stable ground, and have nothing but the work and the reflection of the language to prove to themselves that they've done something or that they've become something. And I don't believe people become. I believe people remember. People can be brilliantly fluent in the language of their own emotional experience. They can tell you every iteration of everything that they've ever experienced, but they can still be governed by that experience in a way that produces reactivity rather than response. They can still be, in the deepest sense of the word, ungoverned. And an ungoverned person is not a free person. They are a person with better vocabulary for their captivity. Let me be clear about what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. And a lot of people will see this video And they'll come on, they go, what is he talking about? It's okay. I'm only talking to people who can hear what I'm saying. Because a lot of people just think, well, I'm fine. Everything's fine. They ignore the pressure. They ignore the weight. They ignore the heaviness. They ignore, and they just continue to say, well, this is who I'm supposed to be. This is who I am. This is all good. This is working because everybody agrees with me. Everybody likes me. Everything's going well for me. And what I'm not saying here is I'm not arguing for emotional suppression. As a matter of fact, that's half the problem. I'm not arguing against emotional awareness. I think that's good. People should know what they feel. To suppress your emotions is dynamically unhuman. And I'm not suggesting that the pre-corrective culture of avoidance and control was healthier. It wasn't. What I'm saying is that emotional awareness as a standalone practice without a stable identity beneath it does not produce freedom. It produces hyper-awareness. And that's not the same as clarity. And the distinction between those two states is where a significant amount of confusion in the current landscape lives. Emotional awareness, then, is knowing what you feel. Okay, it's the ability to go, hey, what's going on in my body? Because emotions are felt in the body. What's going on in my body? What is that? Where did it come from? That's emotional awareness, knowing what you feel. I mean, what is this? Not necessarily where it came from. Emotional stability is not being governed by what you feel. In other words, okay, I feel this in my body. I feel anger. I feel sadness. I feel fear. I feel triggered. But I'm not going to let that move me anyway. It doesn't steer me. It doesn't guide me. It just is. It's information that I have. So emotional awareness is that. Emotional stability is I'm not going to be moved by this. Not because I'm hardened down embracing. It's that I'm not governed by what I feel. Both of these things are valuable, but only one of them is freedom. And in the current conversation in our culture, the first is being taught extensively while the second is being significantly underemphasized. And the reason that's true is that most people who are teaching this stuff have never actually lived in the second space. And the result is a large number of people who are very good at knowing what they're feeling and have no real skill at remaining still in the presence of what they feel. What does it mean to be governed by emotion? It means the emotion determines the response before the person has had a chance to choose. The anger arrives and the person speaks. They feel anger and they act. They act and speak from the anger before anything like genuine reflection has occurred. The anxiety arrives and the person begins to manage the anxiety by seeking reassurance or avoidance or compulsive planning. And they haven't had time to genuinely consider whether the anxiety is true and real and anchored to reality or what it's actually telling them. The shame arrives and the person either collapses into it or defends furiously against it, all before they've had time to engage with whether the shame is accurate or what appropriate response to the situation would actually be. So being governed by emotions is not the same as feeling them fully. It is possible to feel an emotion with full intensity and still choose a response that is not simply the emotion's expression. That capacity, the capacity for genuine response rather than reflexive reaction, is one of the amazing and primary practical benefits of genuine identity stability. And it is built not by having better awareness of the emotions, but by having ground that is stable enough that the emotions can arrive and be present without immediately determining the behavior. So here's what the distinction looks like in practice. You got two people and they're both criticized publicly. Somebody says something to them on the internet or what have you. Both feel the same initial response, a surge of something that includes maybe shame or defensiveness or anger. Person A, who has high emotional intelligence and awareness but is limited in their stability because they're not quite sure of their identity, is governed by the response. The shame produces retreat. The shame produces retreat. Here's a treat. Speaking live. Or the desire to over-explain. The defensiveness produces a counterattack or a lengthy justification. The anger then would erupt or is suppressed into this passive withdrawal, and it becomes bitterness and resentment. The emotion determines the behavior, okay? Person B, who has the same emotional response, but a stable identity beneath it, feels the same surge. They acknowledge it internally and then just take a moment, a genuine moment between the emotion and response. And in that moment, they ask, is this criticism accurate? What response would actually serve the situation? What is the real issue here? And they choose a response and from that question rather than from the emotion's momentum. And the way that they do that is because they don't have to make a choice, because who they are drives their actions, not how they feel. The space between stimulus and response is not produced by more emotional awareness, guys. It's produced by knowing the truth of who you are and where you are in every room, in every field, in every space. Identity stability. And that stability is not the same thing as emotional regulation. It is not knowledge-based facts and figures and faith. It's not emotional regulation in the therapeutic sense, at least. I mean, that typically is taught this way. A set of techniques for managing the intensity of how we feel. And I use them and I teach them. Breathing, reframing. I mean, these are useful tools and they get through very difficult moments. These tools help me develop the 1,215 days today having no anxiety and stress in my body. And they help us get through. But they're not the same as the ground I am describing, because the ground is not a technique. Ground is the settled sense of self that does not require management because it is not threatened by the arrival of an emotion. So what is stability? Identity stability, as I'm using the term, is not the absence of emotional experience. A stable person feels everything a person can feel: grief and anger, fear, joy, shame, desire, loss, and most importantly, love. The full range. What changes is not the presence of the emotions, but the relationship to the emotions. The stable person knows that the emotion is an experience that they are having, not something that is happening to them that they cannot influence. Not the governing fact of who they are in this moment. It's just an experience, meaningful, informative, real, and passing. This relationship to emotion as experience rather than identity is one of the things that genuine identity work produces that emotional awareness alone will not and cannot. Because as long as the emotions are what determine who you are in any given moment, you are not stable. You are reactive. Even when you're calm, you're reactive. And reactivity, however emotionally sophisticated, is not freedom. It is just a more aware version of being governed. The language that matters here is the distinction between I am angry and I am experiencing anger. These two sentences describe completely different relationships to the same emotional state. The first makes the anger the identity. I am it in this moment. I am anger. I am angry entirely. The second places the emotion in the context of a self that is having an experience. The self is not the experience. It is having it. That distinction is not semantic. It's the difference between being inside the emotion and being present to it. The second position is the one from which genuine choice becomes possible. So let's talk about groundedness for a minute. What I'm pointing toward is not less feeling. That's where a lot of people mistake it when they just read up on these things. More grounded feeling. I probably feel emotions now with exponential intensity and with more depth than I ever did when I was having panic attacks 3 times a day for a year. Okay? The full emotional range, experienced from a place of stability rather than from a place of reactive immersion, is possible. And this is what I'm talking about. A grounded feeling is, in every meaningful sense, richer than ungoverned feeling. It may not feel that way. It may not look that way from an onlooker, but it is that way. Because when you are stable enough to be fully present to an emotion without being captured by it, the emotion itself can be experienced with a quality of depth that the reactive relationship to emotion will not allow. The grief can be fully grieved. The joy can be fully felt. The anger can be fully present without immediately becoming harmful behavior. The love can be fully given without the giving being organized around the anxiety of the return. This is the relationship with emotional experience that genuine freedom produces, not less. More, and from a more solid place. The emotions are informative rather than governing. They carry genuine data about the person's experience of their life, of the life of others, and the information then can be listened to from a position of stability and clarity rather than simply enacted from a position of reactivity. The path toward this is not then more emotional processing. It is the work of building genuine identity that has a ground to it. As a matter of fact, it's the work of building the ground and identity ground. So identity ground is built not through the accumulation of more emotional awareness, but through the specific encounter with what is actually true about who you are. Underneath the mask, underneath the performance, underneath the layers, underneath the fears and the feelings, at a level that does not change with the emotional weather. That level, once found and embodied and inhabited, is what allows the emotional weather to arrive completely full, with full force, without becoming the whole of your experience. Emotional awareness is not freedom. It is a tool, a valuable and important tool. But the toolbox does not build the house. The ground does. And the ground is not an emotion. It is the self that is experiencing the emotion. So with all of this, take it in, repeat the video. I'm James Tippins. This is